I will now call to order the Wednesday, December 11th, 2013 Audit Committee meeting of the Sioux Falls City Council. Welcome to all of those in attendance here at Carnegie Town Hall, those viewing us on CityLink or at siouxfalls.org. We'll begin today's meeting with the approval of the minutes of the August 1st, 2013 meeting. Are there any additions, corrections, or do I have a motion?
You have a motion to approve.
Second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Our first order of business this afternoon is an update on external audit of the city's 2013 financial statements.
Yes, and we have Miranda Gallagher from Eide Bailey to present to the committee. So go ahead.
All right. Well, the audit team really hasn't changed too much from last year. Brian is still going to be the technical partner, and Dean is still going to be the communication partner. I will still be in charging the financial statement audit piece, and then Jamie Faye from Fargo will still be doing the A133 piece of it, and then we'll have additional staff members assigned to the project also during field work. Our audit objectives would be perform in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, the government auditing standards, and the circular A133 as it relates to the single audit. And we will obtain reasonable but not absolute assurance about whether the financial statements are free of material misstatements. And then some of our audit procedures will include examining on a test basis, evidence supporting amounts and disclosures, discussions with management, and assess quality of accounting principles and significant estimates as it kind of relates to EBNAR, and then the post-employment benefits, and then the sanitary landfill closure, post-closure costs. Our audit approach, in our planning, we determine if there's been any significant changes related to the entity, and then we base our procedures on that, and then we determine fraud inquiries and how we will audit each section of the balance sheet. We will still do some confirmations, and we form our expectations, and we just we perform a risk assessment on each section as to where we feel that the risk is. Our audit approach is to test account balances, test anything unique that has come up this year that they wouldn't usually be, test the estimates, and then perform the single audit as it relates to the federal expenditures that have been expended by the city. And then there are some new GASBs that are going to come into effect for the year end, which is GASB 61 related to the financial reporting entity, and GASB 65, which are items previously reported as assets and liabilities. These will not have a significant impact on the financial statements for the CAFR. The next one that would be coming into effect would be 12/31/15, number 68, as it relates to the reporting for pensions. This will be some impact. We don't have a lot of guidance out yet. We expect to get some more guidance in 2014 related to this GASB, so we can help inform you better as to the impact it will have on your financial statements. And then the next couple is just kind of how our risk assessment, how we do our risk assessment. It kind of tells you where our risk is and our, as it relates to fraud and inherent risk. I wasn't going to go into too much detail. It's just basically there for your informational purposes. And then I guess I was just making sure that you guys don't have any concerns, or if there's something you'd like us to touch on during our audit procedures, or if you are aware of any fraud that's been going on that we should be aware of. Or
I do have a question.
Rex?
Okay.
Councilor Rolfing?
It just hit me as we got through, we're going through here. I believe that they've implemented, or the new software is in place. Is this making your job easier, harder, or about the same?
Not sure yet. We'll see when we get through this year. I mean, I know last year we were on the old software, And I think you guys were doing it in stages, right? Certain areas were going into the new software, and I think isn't the financial piece the last part, because I payroll was first, or budgeting was first, and then payroll, wasn't it? And then I think you get down to the financial statement piece. What's going to take the most work at first is that you're going to have a new chart of accounts, which we're going to have to import into our software and start grouping. So that may take some time to do, but hopefully we can get it formatted so that it just runs down the report as the city prepares it. So.
Good.
Any other questions or comments for Miranda?
I have a question. Miranda, maybe you want to go over the timetable of the field work and when it'll wrap up. And
Field work for the financial statement piece will happen towards the end of January. It's the same as it has been in the past. I believe the first week that will be out there is January 27th, and we usually have 2 weeks set aside for the financial statement piece. And I know last year the single audit they did at the beginning of March, which I believe is the same plan, and we felt that it went very well. And then the ideal goal is to make sure we issue the financial statements by the end of March. And I think we've done that in the past too. So.
okay.
Any other questions or comments? If not, thank you very much for coming this afternoon, Miranda.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, we have a review of the audit report 13-08, overtime.
Yes, and you should have a hard copy in front of you. I'm going to have Kim take this since she did the audit.
I did perform the audit of overtime, which included an audit for overtime of all city departments, but mainly did focus on the top 2 users, which are Public Works and Police. As we all know, they are the top users just based on the nature of their work. Overall, the city does strive to keep overtime expenses at under 3% organization-wide. We did some review of other audits and other work that we saw out there, and that is very low comparatively to what we see. So we think that the city is doing a good job in that respect. As of September 30th, which was about the end of our field work, the city had paid approximately $1.8 million in overtime. That was high this year. It included approximately $400,000 from timber strike and approximately $380,000 for saturation patrols that were awarded through a grant. The objectives of the audit were to determine when and how employees earn overtime, to obtain an understanding of the management controls over overtime, to review the process for approving and recording overtime, and to evaluate the actual versus budgeted. Overall, we did find the city is doing an excellent job of effectively managing overtime. Each department takes steps to reduce their unnecessary overtime and get it out of their budget. Internal controls seem to be properly designed and functioning at the department level as well as overall in HR. They're reviewing what gets submitted to them. We did note one thing with the current timekeeping system that's used by the police department. There was a bit of a flaw there where it allowed hourly sergeants to approve their own overtime. We discussed this with them and recommended that they modify the system to put controls in place just to prevent that from happening. They concurred, and they've already made those changes in the staffing software. Overall, our review of budget to actual overtime came out with good results. The city as a whole was under budget for all but 2011, and that was primarily due to overtime that was incurred for fire. They went down and helped with the flood relief in Dakota Dunes, and I think that was noted also in our audit last year of fire overtime. The one other thing we did test is we tested overtime to identify any indication of abuse by employees. So we looked at 2013 year-to-date to see if any employees were abusing the system or seemed to be earning too much overtime. We're happy to report we noted no indications of abuse. Anything that we questioned, staff and management were very cooperative and responded to in a timely manner. So overall, our results were good. Like I said, management was very cooperative, and we thank them for their time during the course of the audit.
Any questions for Kim? Seeing none, we'll go on to the next agenda item. Review Audit Report 13-09.
Don't we have to make a
Oh,
motion
we
to
have,
accept?
I'm sorry. Could I have a motion to accept this and pass it on to the council?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. Investment policy?
Right.
Okay. I'll take that one, although the auditor who did that, Danette, had resigned, but I'm very familiar with the report, so I'll be able to answer any question, and also Tracy Turback, the finance director, is here as well. A very short audit report in front of you. When we talk about the investment policy, we're talking about the policy that's used to manage the idle cash that the city has. We call it pooled cash. It's all the cash that departments have. We have it at one account. We have a advisory board of 5 citizen volunteers, very highly qualified people that meet on a regular basis with the finance staff to review what they're doing with the money. As of June 30th this year, and this number changes monthly. At that time, we had $27 million in banks, in local banks, as time deposits or certificates of deposit, and we had $111 million in government securities. And the objective is to get the best return you can, but at the same time, we don't want to put it into anything risky. We don't want to risk the public money, so there's only certain things that we're allowed to invest in under state law and according to the policy. So the audit objectives were to see if the policy that we have is in compliance with the state of South Dakota law regarding investment of public funds. We want to make sure that policy that we have is being followed. We took a sample of investments to see that they were initiated, redeemed, and recorded properly. And then we want to see if there's internal controls in place in regards to this investment practices. The results were good. We found that there was in the policy there was some references to state law that were outdated, and so that needs to be corrected. That was one of our recommendations, that we should the committee and the finance staff should review the policy and just update that to make sure we don't have any references to obsolete or superseded state law. And then according to the policy, there should be written procedures for what the finance staff is doing, and there weren't written procedures, and so we just recommended that the finance director would ensure that there's written policies, and they agreed with that recommendation. And so overall, it was a good audit. We didn't see examples of abuse or poor internal controls or anything like that. Staff was very knowledgeable. The advisory board is very knowledgeable and gives good oversight. And so if there's any questions, Tracy's here or I'm here. So,
Arnie?
Yeah, I was just wondering, that as far as pulling the funds together, you said from the different departments into this single pool.
yes.
Are those tracked to keep track of the
Yeah,
funds coming
within
from
each
one's?
department, you'll have an account in the general ledger called, due from pooled cash. So we have each department is going to have an account in their general ledger saying.
But I mean, as far as the pool goes, because some of those are going to be earning different rates on different things. Is that all tracked, or how does that work?
Tracy, you want to? Maybe you can answer that better than I can. So.
Good afternoon, Tracy Turback with the Finance Office. Yeah, I can take a stab at answering that. But I don't know how familiar all of you are with fund accounting and governmental accounting, but as Rich was describing, the city maintains a number of different funds, general fund, and all of our utilities are in separate funds. But for investment purposes, all that the liquid cash is pooled together for efficiency and ease of investing that. So we don't keep track of a particular government security doesn't necessarily belong to the water fund or the general fund. as that, so it's all really, all that money that's invested is, each fund is earning the same return. It's just those interest earnings are reallocated then back to the funds based on their proportional equity, if you will, in the fund. Does that make sense? Does that kind of address your question? Mm-hmm.
Any other questions or comments? If not, I would entertain a motion to accept the audit report and bring it forward to the council. I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Rich. Okay, and I would guess that you're on for
Yes.
item 3D, review of the 2014 annual audit plan.
Yes, every year we are required to bring this to the audit committee, and then once it's approved by the audit committee, then we present this to the full council. It's adopted by resolution each year. It's sort of our authority to audit each year, and we put all our various plans for audit subjects on there and activities. This year we worked with Media Services to come up with a electronic survey tool. So I asked the directors to fill out a short survey asking about risk factors, any new programs, any new changes in staff in the last couple of years. Any ideas for things that they would like to see audited? Very short survey, got a good response on that. And then I sent an email to the elected officials, the mayor and the city council, just saying, I'm thinking about doing these projects or considering these projects. Is there anything you would like to see? I got pretty good response from many of the council members. I wasn't able to put every single suggestion that I got from management and elected officials on the plan, but I was able to incorporate many of them. And then also, I jot down ideas during the year. I look at what other cities are doing, what trends I see in government auditing. I look at some factors like I want rotation between departments. So we look at what we've done the last 5 or 6 years. We look at opportunities for increased revenue or potential savings or improved service. Any risks that I'm aware of, we kind of throw that all into the mix and we come up with our audit plan. By my count, I think I have 9 audits scheduled for next year. That's about our usual number. Usually we're at about between 9, 10, 11 audits a year. And then we have our just reoccurring activities like technical assistance to various committees or a peer review, which we'll talk about on the agenda here. We do leave some room for quick response or special requests. If somebody comes up with an idea that they want something audited during the year that's not on the plan, they have to come to the audit committee and get your permission for me to do that. So we try to leave a little bit of time so we could maybe squeeze a quick project in if we have to. And so I'll just mention very briefly, just for the audience, what the audits are. We propose auditing the Dakota Golf Management Agreement. There's a management to manage the 3 municipal golf courses with Dakota Golf Management. Special area, another audit is mobile devices, cell phones, and long-distance charges, sort of the phone expenses for the city. Another one is the Convention Visitors Bureau Business Improvement District. And that was created, I think, in 2010 by City Council resolution. We want to see where that $2 fee, how that's collected and what they're doing with the money that's imposed on the hotels in the city. And the CVB uses that money to promote the city. Another item there at the bottom of page 2 is a family daycare registration program. That's a fairly new program where the health department is inspecting the daycares, so we'll kind of focus the audit on the inspection and the enforcement of that. That's been a new program. Top of page 3, payroll. That's one of our biggest expenditures in the city. We'll look at internal controls. Another project is rental rehabilitation program. That was authorized by City Council ordinance in October of 2011. So we'll kind of look at this program, see how that's working. It's money set aside to provide low-cost loans to owners of rental property in the city. Next program we'll look at is the rental registration program. Again, this is a fairly new program where property owners that are using property as rental housing have to, by ordinance, register those properties with the city. and obtain a permit to use the property for that purpose. Next one is we're looking at some of the natural gas bills, especially for some of the largest users, for example, the water purification plant. We get our energy from Mid-American and Constellation New Energy. So we'll look at those bills, make sure we're getting billed properly and how that process works. And a suggestion from Public Works is to look at the construction contracts. We had done this in 2007, our first year of operation. It's probably time to do that again. Again, this is another, like payroll, another huge area of our city budget is construction contracts. Look at the administration of that, how they award the contracts, how they monitor the contractors, that sort of thing. And so that's pretty much the audits we're proposing for next year.
Any questions or comments for Rich?
Yes. Rich, any idea when you're going to do the internal audit on you, or not on you?
Yeah,
on the
yeah.
department?
We'll bring that up shortly here. We got an update on the peer review, and we'll give you. I'll give you.
You're right. It's
Yeah,
up on here.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'll tell you when about that.
Got it.
Yep. Good question.
Any other questions or comments? Should I have a motion to have this brought forward in resolution to the
I'll
council?
make a motion to bring this to the council
And
for
then-
approval.
And then, okay, once the committee approves it, then I'll need 2 signatures on the.
Okay.
And we'll put it on the agenda.
Is there any further discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay, I talked to the clerks, and we're going to try and get that on the agenda for Tuesday night next week on the 17th. So I'll have an agenda approval form. They'll get 2 signatures, and I'll give that to the clerks, and I'll be in front of the city council Tuesday night then with that. So
Great. Thank you. All right, update on the peer review of internal audit
yes,
office.
so this is we'll talk about that. The peer review answers the question, who audits the auditors? The answer is other auditors, other local government auditors. Earlier, I'd sent an email out, I think a few months ago, that there was a request for me to go to Colorado Springs and be part of their peer review. But the problem was, by the time I responded to the email, it was like 24 hours later or 48 hours later. They'd already got enough volunteers. So, but they said they'll keep me on the list. And so part of the program is that if you ask for a peer review, you have to be willing to do the same for another city. So typically it's 2 to 3 auditors will come to Sioux Falls when we have our peer review, and they'll be here, they'll come in Sunday and leave Friday, so they're here basically for the work week and do their inspection. And then they would prepare a written report for the audit committee once they're done to see if we're complying with professional standards. Any recommendations for improvements, anything that they think we're doing really well, they put that in the report. So basically it'd be other volunteers from other organizations like this. My plan is that next month in January I'll contact the peer review coordinator and just say that we'd like to do our peer review probably in August, September, October, kind of that time frame. The weather is pretty decent. They'll have enough audits to look at, to sample. So that's what I was planning to do with permission of the audit committee. So if there's any questions, I'd be.
Any questions for Rich?
So I don't know if you really have to take any action on that, but I think it's more just an update on.
We authorized it earlier.
We'd already authorized. We put it in the budget. The budget cost, we estimated about $5,000. That might be a little high, but that's what the suggestion was. So it's in our budget for 2014 because we have to pay for the airfare, the per diem, those kind of expenses.
I do have
Ann?
a question. Rich, you mentioned that by the time you got back to that invitation to go to Colorado, they had been
Yeah, they'd
gotten
already.
their volunteers.
They already got enough volunteers. Yeah.
Was the delay in your response because of a protocol you needed to follow to get approval to say you
I
were-
think it was a case. I think I was gone that day, or I think it came in on a Friday, and I was gone on Friday. And then Monday, when I opened my email, it was there. And then I think by the time I responded on Tuesday, they were already. So no, it wasn't any protocol.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you feel free to respond immediately if
Yeah,
that kind of
yeah.
invitation comes again?
Yeah, I think what I'll do is if I get the invitation, I'll just respond immediately and then just let the audit committee know that they'd asked me to do this at this city at this time, and yeah.
Rich, that's the one you're looking for in February in Tampa?
Well, and my wife and I are already going to Tampa in January, so we don't need to go in February.
Well, make it Miami.
No, but yeah, I don't know, Colorado Springs in January, it might be nice, but it might have been really cold too, so I don't know. So.
Any other questions or comments on item E? If
Okay.
not, we'll go on to item F,
Yeah.
vacant internal auditor position.
As I mentioned, Danette Schumacher, I think everybody knows she had resigned here. I think October was her final day, and we advertised in November. We got 42 applications in HR. They screened out 26, so that left 16 that met the minimum qualifications. So they gave me the stack of 16, and then I narrowed that down to 6 that I'd like to interview. So the plan is on Monday, on the 16th, in this building, we'll be interviewing the 6 candidates. It'll be myself, it'll be Jane Hannestad, HR manager, and then Ann Oppegard from the audit committee, and that's what we've done the last couple of rounds with, and it's worked pretty well. Try to get them all done in one day, and then make a decision, or at least reach a consensus. So hopefully have somebody here in January, I would hope. So my impression was it's a very highly qualified group of people, a lot of very qualified people applying for these jobs, so that was good. So I was very impressed.
Any questions on that? Thank you, Ann, for agreeing to be part of that interview team. Item G, update internal audit monitoring of event center expenses.
Yeah, we'll let Kim.
Yeah, Rich just asked me to give a brief update of what we've been doing with the event center. I think you guys get plenty of updates, and Tracy did present to the council. As of November, I think the spending was at approximately 50% of the budget. What we've been doing on our end is we get the pay applications and the spreadsheets from Dean, and we are tracing those back to the general ledger just to make sure the expenses all tie out.
Explain who Dean is.
Sorry, I don't know if I know his exact title.
He's in Public Works Administration. I think he's
Right.
he's a manager there.
Business
so,
manager,
yeah.
whatnot. Sorry.
Yeah.
Mortensen provides them with a monthly pay app so that we don't have to deal with all the subcontractors. So they just get one big pay app, and they break out the expenses. So we've just been monitoring it on a monthly basis, making sure there's not expenses hitting the general ledger accounts that are intended for the event center that aren't event center expenses. We will likely give a written report when the project is complete. We just wanted to give a status update. It looks like the event center is still on track to open mid-September 2014, which you all know. The other thing that we were made aware of too is that Ide Bailey had been engaged, and they have actually, I think, finished field work and performed an audit of Mortensen's internal controls, so they are also looking at them from an internal controls perspective. So I think there's a lot of eyes on everything. I also gave you a sheet that Kendra prepared, just showing how many eyes basically look at each invoice and the process it goes through before it actually gets paid. So,
Any
questions on
for Kim? Councilor Rolfing?
Why is it common practice to bring in an IBD or somebody like that at this time in the process of building it to look at that, or is there a specific reason we did that?
I don't know.
Who authorized it?
I think Public Works, initiated that. I think it was I looked up the agreement. It was a $20,000 agreement for Ide Bailey to review the internal controls of Morton Construction, which is the general contractor, and that was done earlier this year. I suppose just given the amount of money that we're spending, they felt it was prudent. Considering we're going to spend $115 million, it seems like a small amount just to make sure somebody is that we're comfortable with their internal controls at Mortensen. So
Maybe Director Turbeck could help us with that answer?
And if you could repeat your question, Rex, just make sure I understand.
Sure, not a problem. I'm just wondering, the audit done by Ide Bailey on the event center, who authorized it, number one? Number two, why was it authorized, et cetera? Is it standard operating procedure for this type of project?
Yeah, I think that's fairly standard. It is something that was provided for in Mortensen's contract with the city, that we could we did have the right to come in and audit their records. And the thinking was that to do it early on, or fairly early on in the project, so that we could be confident that they do have good procedures and good substantiation for the costs that they're billing the city. And so that was kind of the thought process, rather than wait to the end of the project. Let's get it squared away on the front end. If we do have issues or concerns, we could get them straightened out early on. And that is a cost that's absorbed as part of the event center project. So.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Any other questions or comments? If not, no action needed on that. Item H, update consultants audit of the city's health insurance program.
I put this on our 2013 annual audit plan. I had recommended that I would work with HR, that we would consider hiring a consultant to look at our health insurance program. Health insurance in the city is self-funded. In other words, it's the city and the employees both contribute money, and we kind of have our own health insurance program. And I let Bill O'Toole from HR take that for action. He agreed, yeah, that'd probably be a good idea. It's something we had not done in the past. And they hired BMI Audit Services, and I have a copy of the report if you want to see it. It's a very short report, and the focus of the audit was on the dependent eligibility. Typically, when these sort of audits are done, that's typically where you get a lot of savings. The experience of these audit firms that do this kind of work, it's typically 4 to 10%, kind of in that range. You're going to find when you do this audit that you'll find dependents, in other words, children and spouses that are on the health insurance that are not eligible. In other words, for example, an employee gets divorced and their spouse is still on the health insurance. That's not allowed. Or their children age out of the but they just neglect to tell HR or whomever that their children no longer are eligible for health insurance. And typically, sometimes it's simply an oversight. It isn't necessarily at employees trying to defraud the health insurance program. So the way they HR went about it, and this is the best way to do it, is give an analysis is coming, which they did, I think, in May or June of this year, a letter to the employees, and give people a grace period of a certain amount of time, saying, if you have a dependent or a spouse that should not be on the health insurance, let us know by this date. And it's just give people a grace period. And a number of people did that, a number of employees did that. And then after that, the consultant began the audit. I think it was in July. They mailed a letter to the employees. They sent the letter, a verification form, and then a prepaid return envelope to all the employees. I know I got one, Kim got one, I know it was done, so all the employees got this. And I had to find my marriage license, a copy of that, and then for my kids I had to, get a birth certificate showing that they're indeed my kids, and then fill out a couple of items on the form, stick that in the prepaid envelope and mail it off to, I believe it was South Bend, Indiana, BMI Audit Services. And the response was good. There was no employees that did not respond. I mean, there's a few that had to be prompted to comply, but everybody eventually responded, which is good. And I think the results for Sioux Falls were kind of on the low end. About 4% failed or removed, and that's, like I said, the range is usually in that 4 to 10%, so we were a little bit on the low end. There weren't any cases, according to Bill O'Toole, where we paid insurance claims on somebody that wasn't eligible. But now going forward, which is the important thing, that the HR department will proactively, when people get hired, they'll have to provide that documentation, like a marriage license, birth certificate, keep that on file. So that'll be a good improvement. And then any potential savings might be going forward. For example, if we remove people from the health insurance that weren't eligible, if they had future claims, we have potential savings there. So I think it was a good thing to do. The cost, I think, was $14,200, which is very reasonable. That was paid out of the health insurance fund, and so the results were good. And so I think going forward we have a better system in place, and I think we've maybe captured some potential savings, in the future. So are there any questions about that? Or?
Marnie?
I was just wondering, you said it was self-funded. Is there a third-party administrator?
There is, UMR, I think, does the administration, yes. Yeah, the HR department doesn't really process the claims, and that's typical. You usually hire somebody to do that. It's much more efficient that way, so.
Any,
Just real
Counselor
quickly,
Ralphie?
now if I can remember what I was gonna ask, right?
Yeah.
I got mixed up with Arnie's over there. Lost it. I'm sorry. I'll try and
Okay.
remember it.
Okay,
and
yeah,
talk
just
to
let
you
me know.
about
Okay.
any other questions or comments? If not, no action on
No action
that.
necessary. No, I just want to update you on that, just to make sure you're aware of that, so.
So that information will not be provided to the rest of the
No,
council?
if the council wants to know, you could certainly ask Bill O'Toole to present the results if you think that's something they'd be interested in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Counselor Rolfing?
I remember now. So what you've got set up then with these birth certificates and things on people is that you'll have the children's births and that kind of thing on
Yeah,
record.
on
so
record. They'll know.
automatically
They'll
when
know
to take them
automatically.
off.
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes.
Don't they do that to your health insurance on an annual? I know we used to, when I was covered under Salmon's, we had a form that went out every year to each one of the employees saying, here's what you had last year. Is this the same? If
I don't-
not, add to
yeah.
it, that kind of thing. Am I right on that, Arnie? Remember, I remember
That would come from your
doing that.
HR department, would do that for all the employees every year? They would?
Yeah, I think it was HR or the health,
Yeah.
part of that.
As far as I know, having been a long-term employee, I don't think we've ever done that.
I don't know,
Yeah.
if you looked at that as
Yeah.
if there's savings to be had by doing
Yeah.
that, it
Well,
probably would be a cheap thing to do. You can even
Yeah.
do it by email.
Yeah, that's true.
Just an idea.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? If not, we'll go on to item AI, update internal audit managers Mid-America Intergovernmental Audit Forum trip.
That is a mouthful, isn't it?
It is.
So that was a week ago. I left in the middle of that storm, and it was kind of rough. I had to go down to Overland Park on Wednesday afternoon last week, and it was kind of rough traveling until I got to about the Vermilion exit. Then it cleared up, and I was able to continue on, and came back Friday, and so I was there for 2 days. These intergovernmental audit forums have been organized by the federal auditors for quite a while. I'd say at least a decade, and they're done on a regional basis. There's probably 8 or 9 regions that have these audit forums, usually yearly, sometimes twice a year, depending on the region. And it's a chance for government auditors at the local, the state, and the federal level to get together and get some continuing education, get some networking, and so this was my 3rd one that I've been to down in the Kansas City area. This one was at a beautiful facility at University of Kansas has a satellite campus in Overland Park, and so we were on campus there, and there were 90 auditors there. And in the past, it's been about 25 to 30, but this one they had to change the room because they had about 90 people there, so that was kind of fun. And Rex, I think you mentioned this when you gave your report, having come back from Seattle. You were there for the, National League of Cities a few weeks ago. That when you go to other cities or on these conferences and you talk to people in other cities, you find out that Sioux Falls is in pretty good shape. One of the presentations we had was from, it was kind of a panel discussion, and one of the panelists was the city auditor for Kansas City. They're struggling, and they've had some issues in Kansas City with revenue, and they've had a hiring freeze imposed. They've had a reduction in force over the last few years. So their audit shop went from maybe 15 or 16 auditors down to maybe a dozen. And then when somebody has left recently, he can't hire, even though he has an authorized position, because they've imposed a hiring freeze because of revenue. A lot of the federal auditors there's that sequestration, I believe that's the term. In other words, they've got a lot of audit work on their plates, but they can't hire anybody new, and their budgets are being slashed, so they have tales of woe to tell. And then one of the presentations was from the city auditor, or former city auditor of Stockton, California, and if you followed the news, Stockton is one of the municipalities that declared bankruptcy. Detroit, obviously, I think this year, and then last year was San Bernardino and Stockton and several other local municipalities that declared bankruptcy. So he told what that was like. He has a new job in Hanover County, Virginia. He's the auditor there, so he went from California over to Virginia. But one of his main topics was a threat to or impairments to auditor independence. He said, when the place is in an emergency condition, do you just keep auditing or you pitch in and help? Like when the place is flooding, do you audit or do you fill the sandbags? And they chose to help because the finance department was desperate, and they came over to the audit shop and said, can you help us with this? And he said, yeah, we can do that. Can you help us with this? Yeah, I think we can do that. And finally, can you help us prepare the financial statements? He drew the line at that. He said, I can help you with that, but I shouldn't because it's an impairment to independence. But he just said it's something auditors really got to watch very, very closely. Becoming too familiar with the audit clients, or just over time how your independence can be impaired for various reasons. And so that was just fascinating to listen to, and to listen to what it's like to live in a city that's going through bankruptcy. The crime, the people leaving town, the decreased services. It's very sad. We should be so fortunate we live in Sioux Falls where we don't have those type of issues to worry about. So that was fascinating. Another panelist that spoke was the Nebraska State Auditor, Mike Foley. And he described how he transformed the state auditor office in Nebraska. They had done strictly financial statement audits, and they began doing performance audits, and he had some really interesting audits they had done in the last 5 years down in Nebraska. If you're interested, I can tell you later. One had to do with the Office Depot contract that the state had for office supplies. One had to do with kickbacks on Nebraska Cornhusker tickets. That was a big scandal. He had lots of. He really transformed that office, and that was fascinating. Another speaker that was fascinating was the FBI agent based in Omaha. He's the supervising special agent specializing in the white collar crimes out of the Omaha office, and he talked just for a couple hours on white collar crime. That was fascinating. Learned more details about the Dixon, Illinois case. That was the comptroller, Rita Grundwell, that had taken $53 million from the city of Dixon, and more details on how that was done and what happened to the CPA firms that had done the financial statements. So that was interesting. Got a whole stack of ideas here. Hopefully, I talked to Kim about some of the ideas. Hopefully, we can use some of those ideas that we picked up. So it was very good audit conference. One thing, though, that's coming down the pike, when I talked about those municipal bankruptcies with Detroit, Stockton, and a bunch of other cities, don't want to be too alarming, but there's a lot of concern out there about municipal bonds, that if this becomes a trend where cities are declaring bankruptcy and getting out of their obligations, what's that's going to do to the municipal bond market. It's a concern that if they're not considered investment grade investments for people, or that it may pollute the municipal bond market if these bankruptcies, if we get more and more of these things going on. Investors are going to be leery of them. There could be some fallout from that, so that's something to keep an eye on. So,
any questions for Rich? Thank you. Very informative report. We now come to the part of the meeting that is open discussion. Is there any open discussion items by any of the members of the committee? If not, I would entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. This meeting is adjourned.